Morning, everyone. That was really good, actually. Way to go. Welcome to Imperfect Church. If this is your first time here, welcome. There's a welcome table out the doors to the right. Gives us information about you and gives you information about us. Just have a few announcements today. We've been announcing this, the summer off time. Some of our programs shut down in the summer. Youth group, today's the last day. Today at 6, so last day of youth group. Next Sunday is the last kids club, which is June 14th. And finishing Well's last day is June 15th, which is a Monday. Youth group parents, we have a meeting today downstairs in the youth group room. This is for youth group parents who are for next season. It's going to be probably a pretty brief meeting. I wouldn't expect it to be pretty long. It'll be myself and Pastor Mark. Pastor Mark has a tendency to get caught and then also book a lot of meetings for himself. So he has 2 meetings today. So because of that, the youth group parents meeting will be 10 minutes after the service. And the reason why is because 20 minutes after the service, Pastor Mark has joined the team. So today is week 2 of the Join the Team class that's been going on. And then next week, the 14th, will be the 3rd day. Just to those who have signed up, don't forget, 20 minutes after the service, there will be a timer. Probably, I'm pretty sure. Yes, I heard yep from the quarter. So yes, there will be a timer for that. So oftentimes we end up, making announcements about how, we're missing such and such, or we need help in this program, or things like that. Well, today I'm going to make the opposite announcement, which is the cleaning sign up. Cleaning sign up. If you look at it, it's pretty full, which is great. That's fantastic. We only have 1 month this year missing. Which is November, so we're pretty far off from that too. But thank you to all who have signed up for that. It's a really it's a small thing that doesn't get noticed, but then we come in and go, it's pretty clean in here. Well, this is the reason why. So thank you all for signing up for that. Before Pastor Mark comes up and speaks today, let's pray together. Dear God, we thank you for this day, and we thank you for another opportunity to hear from you and hear from your word, God, and what you have for us today, God. I pray as the week goes on that we not only reflect on what we hear today, God, but that we also would go into the Bible ourselves, God, and read your word and hear from you, God, about what you have for us. Because Sunday is not the only day that we're supposed to be dedicated towards you and to be looking towards you, God. That's every day for the rest of our lives, God. And I pray we remember that as we go about each day, God. I pray that our ears and hearts would be open to you today, God, and what you have for us. In your name we pray. Amen.
Thank you, Richard. And good morning, church family. It's good to be able to have you here, and I'm excited to be able to open God's Word with you. We're going to be looking here in just a moment, get the right slide up, at John chapter 2, and I encourage you to be able to turn there if you have your Bibles with you, or if you're using one of the Bibles underneath the chairs. We're on page 740 there, and I'm excited to be able to take you to the section that we're looking at as we started a series here just a couple weeks ago looking at the book of John, walking through each section together, and we noted right away at the very beginning of the series that John was clear towards the end of the book as to his purpose and why he was writing. He said, these things are written that you might believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God. So he's just really clear. This is why I'm writing. I want to make sure that you know this. And then once you believe that Jesus is the Christ, he wants to make sure that we then learn how to have life in his name. And not just life like as in eternal in heaven and so forth, but right here in the right here and now. And so with that background, focusing on our belief, first of all, he begins to give us some evidences. And we see this laid out in the section section that we're going to look at today as we begin some of this. And so John lays out for us some things here that I think you'll find actually kind of surprising. It's a surprising section of the Bible in a number of different ways. So let's take a look at it together. It says here in verse 1, on the third day, a wedding took place at Cana in Galilee. And we start off with this wedding. And I love weddings. As a pastor, I usually get the best seat in the house, right? Like I get to be right there front and center, and you got the groom and the bride and the groom, and they're right there, and I get to see all the nervousness and all the, like, it's really, really cool. Now, when they do the whole kiss thing, and I'm in the middle, that's awkward, right? I have to step out of the way or something. That can be a little weird, but I enjoy the best seat in the house. It's good. Probably the most awkward thing I've had happen at a wedding was actually not a wedding that I was doing the wedding, but I was in a wedding, and I was one of the groomsmen. And so, you're standing on the one side, and you're looking at the bride and the groom, but past them, you can see the bridesmaids, and I noticed something was off with this one girl, and I couldn't figure out what was going on. I'm looking at her face has got this weird look on it, and she goes, boom, falls down. She completely passed out. I'm like, whoa. So they get her, they get her back up and whatever. She's like, I'm fine. And so she's standing there, like less than 2 minutes later, down she goes again. So front row for you. So she sat down. That was the end of that. We are done there. So I learned as a pastor, make sure to tell people in a wedding party, don't lock your legs for 30 minutes at a thing. You're going to pass out, right? So it was good for me. Cana, going back to this. Cana is about 5 miles from Nazareth, so about an hour and a half to 2 hour walk from where Jesus' hometown was, which is partially what explains Jesus' mother being there. And there's some speculation as to why she was there. Was she there because it was a relative getting married or a friend or something like that? Or was it just because everyone was invited in the area to be able to come? Because that's how weddings and so forth were done. Because weddings in that day were a really, really big deal. I mean, they're a big deal today, but weddings in that day were a really, really big deal. We think of ours as being big and extravagant and so forth, but in that day, they would usually be preparing for this wedding for a good year or maybe longer, and it would accompany a week-long celebration. It wasn't just a day, but a full 7 days of celebration. If you know anything about this time period, the way the engagement worked, you might say, when a couple got engaged, it was a betrothal. This is something that was stronger than our engagement period, but it's the closest thing in our culture that we can reference to it. So the betrothal period, they would be legally married, like signed documents, that kind of thing, right? Legal, but stronger. So it's stronger than our engagement period. But they were in every way legally married, except they weren't living together, hadn't consummated the marriage, no sexual relationship yet, and so forth. But during that betrothal period, the husband would be working towards the wedding day, not only planning for the celebration, making sure finances and all the different things were in place, but he'd also be working on housing. Oftentimes that'd be in addition to his dad's house, something like that, to be able to provide. So that year was full of a lot of things. But the planning for the wedding actually went well beyond that year. Any family that would have a son would know that there was this expense coming, right? They've got a warning that they're going to be providing for a big celebration with a whole bunch of people. That's not just, an hour or two, but a full 7 days. That's a big party. So they'd be working finances, cattle, land, etc., to make sure they had enough money and resources on hand for when their son got married. So they could afford to host such a huge multi-day party. Like, it was a big deal. And if you look at these towns, Nazareth and Cana, historians tell us that those towns were only about 200 to 400 people each at this town. So you might think you come from a small town. These are really, really small towns. And typically the way these celebrations would work, because people had other responsibilities and so forth, so they'd come in for a day or two and then go back home and so forth. So it wasn't like everybody was there at the same time, but a good number of people coming in and out. So probably around 200 or so people there on a daily basis. So it's a lot of food, right, to be able to provide and so forth. Another interesting detail you might want to know going into this is that legally, there's actually some historical evidence, some documents that indicate that the groom and the parents the groom's parents were actually legally responsible for some of that festivities, right? As in, if things were not done well and not provided for well, the bride's parents could sue for breach of contract on what was supposed to be provided. I mean, you might have had a heavy wedding day, right? But that's some pressure on it. So it's pretty interesting to be able to look at. They took these celebrations very, very seriously. So Jesus' mother here, she'd come to this wedding, and it says Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. And that's kind of interesting, right? Because many people today think of Jesus as this holier than thou, if you will, sucking on lemons, type guy, no fun at all. Even though we've learned from week 1 in this series that it's Jesus who is actually the one that created the entire world. So we know that Jesus, of course, then has this sense of humor. Just look around at some of the people around you. Jesus clearly has a sense of humor, right? True, right? So Jesus is in no way fighting a good time, right? And think with me about this, right? Given that he's the creator of the world, that means he quite literally is the author of all that is truly fun. Think, right? Inventing such things as, I don't know, sex, for instance, right? Like Satan likes to lay claim to it and distort it, but Jesus is the one who came up with the idea. So Jesus isn't a party pooper here, and we discover that playing out in what happens next. It says, when the wine was gone, Jesus' mother said to him, they have no more wine. And oh man, this is a great verse, right? Like my Catholic friends love this verse, right? We've got Mary and wine. I mean, what is not to be able to love about this verse, right? It's perfect. But before we get too far into that, I just want you to notice 5 things here real quick, getting away from the Mary thing a little bit, right? I want you to notice something here. First of all, what we're talking about is a big shame problem type situation. These weddings, as we said, were big deals. And so if they were running out of wine or about to run out of wine, that would be just a huge disgrace on that groom and on his parents. Remember, they've been planning on this for forever, and they failed at that now, right? So big shame, not to mention the poor bride inside of all this. Like, this is bad. It's not a good deal. Like, probably the only thing bigger than this issue for us church people is the alcohol conversation, which nobody wants to have the alcohol conversation, right? It divides people, it divides churches and so forth. But let's look at this real briefly. We don't have time to go into everything the Bible has to say about this, but I think it's important to recognize that when we're talking about the wine that's here, we're talking about we're talking more about wine coolers as far as alcohol content than we are whiskey. In John's day, John, as he's writing this gospel, the alcohol by volume percent there in Jesus' day and in John's day was pretty low compared to what many are drinking today. And it's interesting looking at some of this and doing a little bit of Googling on this. Like, this is not my area of expertise, right? But Googling on this a little bit, these are supposedly what are the more popular drinks that people are drinking and so forth. And you'll notice it's basically twice or more the content of what was being drunk in Jesus' day here. And looking through the list of things and so forth, I was surprised to see that mimosas were not in that most popular things. It seemed for a while there I was hearing mimosas like all the time, and it was being added to like every menu and so forth. So that was just interesting to me. And again, you'll notice how much higher that is than in Jesus' day. I also learned reading through this that this 40 to 50% number, I learned that legally in most countries, including here in the United States, it can't even be called rum or whiskey unless it has at least 40% or higher. Like, I didn't know that. I didn't know that was a thing. So legally it has to be that. It's pretty interesting. And then there's some really high things, of course. Cask strength. I assume that means casket. No, I'm just kidding. That's not... It's not what that means, right? But here in our passage in John 2, what we're talking about is what amounts to a modern wine cooler type drink as far as alcohol content, right? It's not the whiskey. So that's important to be able to notice what it is that we're talking about here. I think it's also important for us to be able to recognize the cultural norm of that day, right? Like, drinking straight wine was actually something that was culturally frowned upon, both in the Jewish culture, the Greek culture, the Roman culture. Like, the people of that time frowned on drinking straight wine. It was usually diluted 3 parts water to 1 part wine. So it's quite watered down, right? 3 parts water, 1 part wine. Not diluting it was considered reckless, barbaric, considered something that only drunkards and that kind of thing would do. So that's interesting. The fourth thing here, though, for us this morning, I think it's important to state, and we're not going to go into too much detail on all this, but the Bible approaches drunkenness as a sin. It calls that straight out. It does not say drinking alcohol is a sin. It doesn't call that at all. Apostle Paul tells Timothy, take a little bit of wine for your stomach. Some of you might remember that passage, right? The medicinal purpose. He's not telling him to go get drunk. He's telling him to take a little bit of wine for your stomach. We might think today of like a NyQuil or something like that, right? There's a medicinal thing in NyQuil, and yes, it has some alcohol in it, but that's fine to be able to take. But it's interesting as we look at this drunkenness, alcohol, wine, all of that, did you just be able to think for a minute about what God has created and what God says is good, and then what Satan does with things, right? Because Satan always repackages any good gift from God. Think, Satan always repackages good gifts from God. Even food, right? You have gluttony on one side, bulimia on the other. Food itself isn't bad. It's a gift from God, but it can certainly become a sin for us, and the same thing is true of alcohol. Proverbs chapter 20 tells us this: wine is a mocker. Like, it laughs at us, often getting us into trouble, and beer a brawler. Think about this. How many fights have spilled out when people are drinking Pepsi or Mountain Dew, right? It's not a thing. It's not a thing. It doesn't happen, right? But it happens with beer quite a bit. Therefore, we need to think about what we're doing. As whoever is led astray by them is not wise. Right. It's a good phrase. Led astray by. Right. That's right. Like, I've visited my share of people in prison who've gotten their most recent DWI. And none of them planned to be there that day. That was not their plan. That's not what they set out to do. It led them astray. True that. Can we drink? Yes. Does the Bible prohibit all alcohol consumption? No. But it does warn us of abusing it and of it abusing us, right? So enough on all of that, but there is one more question that I'm sure you're asking, and that is, what about you? Right, Pastor Mark, do you drink? No, I do not drink. Why? Well, first of all, if you know how much coffee I drink, you know that no one should let me near alcohol. It's just going to not be a good equation at all. It's not going to go well, right? But there's also Proverbs chapter 31, where King Lemuel's mama is giving him some life lessons, and this is the famous Proverbs 31 woman, is what we tend to think about Proverbs 31. It's King Lemuel's mama giving him some advice about women. If you're not familiar with that chapter of the Bible, you need to read that. But before King Lemuel's mama gets to the woman part, she has some things to be able to say, and that includes on alcohol. She says this: it is not for kings, Lemuel. It is not for kings to drink wine, not for rulers to crave beer. Why not? Well, think about the role that a king has. Think about the role that a president has, right? So she goes on, lest they drink, don't do this, because if they drink and forget what it has been decreed, they'll deprive all the oppressed of their rights. Like, the king, the president, won't be able to be on it and on top of things because they've been compromised by alcohol. That kind of makes sense, right? That kind of thought is what she's saying. If you're the king, the one in charge, you don't want to be compromised at any point in the day because you don't know what is going to come up. And I'm no king by any stretch of the imagination, but I get phone calls all the time at any time of the day. Like, I get them all the time, where it's an emergency counseling situation or some kind of emergency thing that's going to take me to the hospital or something like that. Like, at what point in my day can I afford to start drinking and be compromised? Like, I need to be ready to be on to the best of my abilities. I stand before God for the counsel I'm going to give and all those things. Like, I have to be on and be ready for that. There's no place that I can do that I could see. So I think that's important. So I don't drink, and that's why. But it's important to be able to point out here, there is no absolute prohibition against drinking in the Bible. But we should also not deceive ourselves if we know our own tendencies and so forth. And we shouldn't deceive ourselves into making blanket statements about wine in the Bible as if references to wine in the Bible are the same as our whiskeys today or whatever. No, completely different. So I get it. Some of us here might be consumed with the alcohol question. See what I did there? Some of us might be consumed with just that thought. But what is consuming Mary in this scenario here, what's concerning Mary, the mother of Jesus, was the complete disgrace and shame that would be brought on the groom and his family if this wine situation wasn't taken care of. So she brings this to Jesus. Jesus responds, "Woman, why do you involve me?" Jesus replied, "My hour has not come." And I recognize this sounds kind of harsh, right? In our way of talking today, that would just not go over well, right? Well, listen, woman, it's not gonna work. It's not good. But this word that Jesus is using is not that word at all. Actually, if you remember the scenario when Jesus is on the cross and he provides for his mom in his absence. Do you remember that on the cross? Here's the scenario. It says, near the cross of Jesus stood his mother. And when Jesus saw his mother there and the disciple, he said to her, "Woman, here is your son." And to the disciple, "Here is your mother." From that time on, this disciple took her into his home. The Greek word that is here is Jesus not being harsh at all. He's being polite. It's a positive reference. We might say like ma'am or something like that today, right? It's a positive reference. There's no negative disrespect in the term at all. But, and this is important to notice, This word is not a familial word, as in Jesus here isn't speaking to his mom as his mom here. He's speaking to her as God, Jesus in the flesh. Remember everything we looked at in chapter 1? He's speaking to her as God in the flesh, speaking to her as a woman. He's telling her flat out, my hour has not yet come. And this phrase, especially in the book of John, the Gospel of John, is quite telling. We see it come up over and over again. He says it here, my hour has not come. Chapter 7, his hour had not yet come. Chapter 12, the hour has not come. It was for this very reason that I came to this hour. The hour referring to his crucifixion and what's going to happen there. Chapter 13, Jesus knew that the hour had come for him to be able to leave the world and to be able to go to the Father. Father, the hour has come. Glorify your Son, that your Son might glorify you. So big picture here, right? What Jesus is saying to his mom is, listen, I love you, but I need to be about my Father's business. That might sound familiar to some of us that know the rest of the Bible, right? I'm operating on the timetable that is God's, not yours. And it's not time yet for me to be able to go to the cross. So, Mom, if you're looking for me to go full God mode here, this isn't the time, right? This isn't the big flashy moment, Mom. Now is not the time yet. And we might laugh at this a little bit, right? But this is a big moment. And it's actually a big moment for many young men, if we stop for a minute and step back a little bit, because there's this moment for every young man where you go from being a little boy to being a man, and you're stepping back from mom a little bit going, I love you, I respect you, but I know what God has said, and I know what God has called me to here, and so I am going to walk with God and pursue what he wants. Now, the way that conversation often ends up going in our culture today is minus God. Mom, the heck with you, and we bolt and just do what we want to do. That's the way that often happens. That's a struggle for that young person. It's a struggle for the mom as well. But it should be a healthy moment where, okay, I appreciate everything, Mom, but you have taught me to walk with God, so I'm walking with him now. That kind of a moment. Interesting to see that play out here. Some mamas miss it. It can be tough. But Jesus here is clear, and Mary seems to get it as well, though she does pull a bit of a mom move next. She does pull a bit of a mom move next. Next verse says, his mother said to the servants, do whatever he tells you to be able to do. Can you see that? I can almost see the side eye, right? Whatever he says to do, just do that, right? It's a mom move. You can kind of see it. But think with me about this, about the context of all this, right? Like Mary knows that Jesus is special. We were very, very confident that she understands who Jesus is as the Messiah. Remember the whole Christmas story, the angel coming, telling her, and so forth. Like she knows that Jesus is special. But not only that, right? Jesus at this point is around age 30. So think with me about this. The Bible records for us Joseph, Mary's husband. The last time we see Joseph show up in the Bible is when Jesus is 12. So either Joseph bailed on the family, it's possible, more likely he died. And so Jesus, as the oldest son, has been taking care of mom for all these years. So not only does Mary have the word of the angels and so forth, but she's been living with Jesus probably since those young teen years, 15, 16. And Jesus, no offense to us guys, but Jesus did a really good job, right? Coming alongside of mom and helping mom and doing all those things to help out around the home and so forth. He stepped into that perfectly. So Mary's used to this. When something goes wrong, she's used to turning to Jesus as the man of the house and him dealing with it, and him dealing with it perfectly. So she's like, hey, whatever he says to do, just do it. Like, I've got some experience at this as Jesus' mom. I've seen this play out over and over and over again. Jesus is always right. Like, whatever he says to do, it's always right. What Jesus says to do is always best. So just do whatever he tells you to do, and that is what will be best for all involved. Just trust me. I've been doing this for a few years now with Jesus. It's actually interesting, isn't it? Maybe a bit of a lesson for us here today as well. What Jesus says, just do that. Just do that. Those who knew him best, Mary, his own mama, points to this simple truth. Whatever Jesus says to do, just do that. That always works out to be the best. Just do what he tells you to do. It says nearby stood 6 stone water jars, the kind used by the Jews for ceremonial washing, each holding about 20 to 30 gallons. So 6 jars, 20 to 30 gallons. So you're talking somewhere between 120 and 180 gallons. That's a lot of water. Jesus said to the servants, fill the jars of water. So think about this for a minute, what Jesus is asking them to do, right? Like this is a lot. This is 166 pounds, 250 pounds, someplace in there, depending on the exact size of these, right? So you're not going to be like carrying one of these jars and just like dipping it, and carrying 166 pounds of water or whatever. No, they're picking up buckets likely and going to a well or a stream or something like that, doing the bucket brigade to be able to fill these things. Like it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. But they listened to Mary and they did what she told them to do in listening to Jesus. And so they filled them. They filled them to the brim. Then he told them, now draw some out and take it to the master of the banquet. This would be like a wedding planner, you might say today, right? Bring it to the person who's in charge of the wedding. So they did so, and the master of the banquet tasted the water that had been turned into wine. Now, this is amazing. Think about this for a minute. Can you imagine being those servants, right? Like these servants are used to being told what to do because that happens to them all the time, right? And they're used probably to people saying, listen to my son. It's like, yeah, I've heard that one before. Nepotism is as old as they get, right? Like we've heard all that before. I get that, right? But their job is do what they're told, so they do what they're told. And somewhere along the way, it turns into wine. And it's very interesting to me because we're not told exactly where it's turned into wine. We're not sure. But it's fun to be able to speculate. Like, did it turn into wine when they dipped the cup to be able to get some water out? As they pulled it up, did it turn to wine right there? Right? Did it turn right there? Maybe, we're not told, right? Maybe as they're bringing it, so they're carrying it to the master of the banquet, and as they're walking, they're like, what in the world? And it changed. Did it happen there? Did it happen as they physically went to the act? Like, they told me to bring water. This is so stupid. And as they hand it to them, it changes. Whenever it happened, you have to know they busted a move back to the other servants, right, that helped gather the water. And so you're not going to believe what happened. Fascinating. But the wedding planner dude, he didn't realize where it had come from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew. Then he called the bridegroom aside and said, everyone brings out the choice wine first and then the cheaper wine after the guests have had too much to drink. But you have saved the best till now. And the man kind of lets us in on an age-old trick, doesn't he, right? Get the wine flowing, get the party in a couple days, and yeah, it's a lower alcohol content, but if you've been drinking for a few days, it's starting to add up now, right? And getting a little bit tipsy, and then you bring out the cardboard wine, right? You bring out the cheap stuff. You bring out the cheap stuff. But you didn't do that, right? The wedding coordinator said, you didn't do that. You saved the best till last. Think with me for a minute. Translation here, Jesus doesn't make bad wine. When the creator of the world makes wine, it tastes better than the best this family. Remember, they've been planning for this since this kid was first born. They've been planning up for this. So they'd been serving the good stuff, the best they could afford. All that stuff was already gone. And now what Jesus makes, it tastes way, way better than that. So much that the guy running the wedding goes, you saved the best to last. That's amazing to be able to think about. So think about it with me here today. What Jesus creates is good. What Jesus creates isn't junk, it's the best. And that's amazing to think about when we consider such modern issues as those wrestling with trans or anorexic views of their bodies. Jesus says, no, I created you just the way that you are. You are not a mistake. You are as I intended. You aren't some cheap wine poured into cheap throwaway cardboard containers. You are my special creation, created to be exactly who I intended you to be. And that thought is amazingly helpful and encouraging for us if we stop and think about it. But what's amazing to me is this groom in the scenario. Like, can you imagine this groom here? As he's pulled aside, I mean, he almost certainly would have been aware that the wine was running low, right? Because it was his family and so forth that were in charge of this whole thing and whatever. So he almost certainly knew that things were running out. He had to be aware of this unfolding crisis that was happening as the wine ran lower and lower and lower. He had to be freaking out a little bit, right? And now the master of the ceremonies here pulls him aside. He's like, oh, here it is. The jig is now up. Like, it's going to come down now. This is where everything goes bad. And, oh, man, my parents, they're just going to be ridiculed for forever, and my poor bride, and like he's got to be worked up over all that stuff. It's sad, right? The scenario that's unfolding here, it's a terrible way to start off a marriage. But that's not what ended up happening, because Jesus stepped in. Jesus stepped in, and not in a flashy way. There was no waving of the hands and creating a stir, like Jesus didn't stand up. Moses divided this, and what I'm going to do with the water is going to be much bigger than... None of that. Jesus didn't do any of that. He didn't create a scene. The only thing Jesus created was wine without a word. Without a word, without a wave of the hand. Jesus just worked through obedient servants. Think with me. Think with me. Jesus worked through obedient servants. That's good. Think about that. It's still true for us today. God's still working through servants. Almost all of the big miracles that happen in our day are first seen by those who are serving. Think. They are just serving. They're just taking Mary's advice and doing whatever Jesus says. And in so doing, they find themselves on the front lines of all the big things that God is doing. It's so cool to be able to see that here as well as in our day. But before we think more on that, I want you to notice with me here John's summary of this little situation. John, as he writes the Gospel of John, he summarizes this whole scenario this way. What Jesus did here in Cana of Galilee was the first of the signs through which he revealed his glory. And his disciples believed in him. After this, Jesus went down to Capernaum with his mother and brothers and his disciples, and they stayed there for a few days. There's a lot here. It's a huge conclusion that John gives. I want you to notice for me what John points out to us. First of all, he points out that this was the first of the signs, the miracles that Jesus did, to which he was revealing who he was, that he really is God. Remember, that's part of the purpose of why John is writing what he is, right? That we might believe that he is the Christ. So in this instance here, he's proving that by showcasing Jesus' ability to be able to miraculously create, turning water into wine, not in a matter of weeks or months or years or whatever through the fermentation process and so forth, not through the waving of hands, speaking words or whatever. No, he just told people what to do, and in their doing it, a miracle occurred. And this was the first of those miracles. And we're going to see more as we continue on in the Gospel of John. That's a big part of the Gospel of John. We're going to see more of that. But notice with me here that John flat out states that this is the first miracle that Jesus does. And that's significant for us. Why? Because there's other books that are floating around out there, like the Gospel of Thomas, the so-called Gospel of Thomas, that people think is on the same level with the Bible and that kind of thing. And in that Gospel of Thomas, that book that's not a part of the Bible at all, has Jesus as a 5-year-old little boy making clay birds, making out of clay, making it look like a bird, and then chucking them up in the air, and they turned into sparrows. Woo! Jesus is a 5-year-old doing miracles. No, John says, no, there wasn't that kind of thing. This is the first right here, he says. And done in such a way, not for everybody to be able to see, not yet. That wasn't where Jesus was at yet. It was just for a smaller audience, the groom, the servants, the disciples, some of those people on the inside of things, they knew. And think about this for those disciples. They're so early in their journey with Jesus. If you've been with us through the whole series so far, we looked at this in chapter 1, and they had come to believe that Jesus is the Messiah, but they're at the very beginning of things with him. And now they see this, right? Now they see this. So helpful in the growing of their faith. It's all pretty awesome. But stopping and thinking about all this for us today and trying to bring it into 2026 a little bit, what are some of the lessons here for us as we look at some of this? Well, first, I want you to notice with me here a couple things on Mary. And I think this is important to be able to bring up quick because there's some big church groups and in our area, the Catholic Church and others, for instance, and I love my Catholic friends. But the Catholic Church teaches that Mary remained a virgin for her entire life, which of course contradicts what's on the screen here, referencing Jesus's brothers. It just flat out says it, talks about sisters elsewhere. The Catholic Church also likes to point out this section of the Bible to state that we should pray to Mary. We should pray to Mary because Jesus listened to Mary. That's the way the argument goes. But there's a host of problems with that. Not to mention the clear statement that Jesus makes back to her, right? Woman, my hour hasn't come. He's actually confronting what it is that she's saying and separating himself from her and pointing to God's will instead of hers. That's flat out what is happening here. But then there's also the bigger, more obvious issue of Mary herself directing everyone to listen to Jesus. So to my Catholic friends, if you truly want to take Mary seriously, then listen to what she herself says to do. Listen to Jesus. That's what Mary says. Listen to Jesus and do whatever he tells you to be able to do. So you don't go to Mary, you don't pray to Mary, you go to God. You pray to God and you listen to Jesus and you do whatever he tells you to do. It's pretty good advice right there. and maybe some advice that we need to take this week ourselves as we go to the Bible. Maybe as we go to the Bible this week, we shouldn't be going to the Bible just to look for feels, because that's oftentimes what we do. Go to the Bible looking for some kind of warm, fuzzy, whatever. Instead of looking to the Bible for feels, maybe we should look at the Bible and go, what is he telling me to do? What is it that God wants me to do in response to what it is that he's written for us here? What does he want me to do? And as we're studying that and we become convicted of these things that God is clearly calling us to do there, we should do them. Whatever Jesus says to do, go do that. That's what Mary herself is telling us to be able to do. But I know some of us, as we look at all this, we're just fixated on the wine part. I get it. Okay, I get it, right? But it should really amaze us here that Jesus chose his first miracle to be servant, obedient, based. Think about that. Jesus could have made a commotion, could have made this a whole big deal, could have done the Moses, stand up in the middle, he could have done all that. Instead, he chose to be able to work through servants. And it should amaze us that Jesus' first miracle was done, yes, to be able to help the disciples' belief. That is completely true in the big picture context of the book of John. But it's also true that the occasion of the miracle was a simple case of shame and embarrassment. Think about it. That was the occasion for this. There's nothing earth-shattering that's happening here. There's not a global war about to break out and Jesus steps in or something. No, this is just a dude and his family embarrassed at their wedding, right? Maybe a lawsuit. Certainly rather pedestrian as far as problems go, right? But into those ordinary circumstances, Jesus chose to step. Jesus chose to help. And Jesus chose to do so in such a way as to not embarrass the groom or his family. Not at all. He simply does the miracle on the down low, and then he steps back. Only the servants and so forth even see it. It's fascinating. Jesus, the helper of the ordinary in the ordinary, is what we see here in the first miracle. Sometimes, as we're going through life, we feel when we go to prayer that we can't really think of anything big and bad going on in our own life. So I don't really know what to pray about. I mean, I have things going on in my own life, but they're big to me, but it's not like the war in Ukraine or something. So I don't know what I can pray about and whatever. No. We can pray about those things. We can pray about the bigs. We can pray about the smalls. We can pray about all of those things. And this is the very first miracle that we see Jesus performing. Was in a pedestrian, normal, everyday thing. Was this big in the global scale things? No, but it was big to them. And Mary came, Jesus. Let's listen to Jesus and do what he tells us to be able to do. So in light of all that, I want to encourage you this week, 3 things. 1, pray. And then on everything that's going on in your life. The things you perceive as big, the things you perceive as small. In the small is Jesus showing up and acting here in this scenario. And then do whatever Jesus tells you to do. Actually, we were talking about Mary here just a moment ago. Do you know what the very last words of Mary are in the Bible? The last words that Mary speaks in the entire Bible. Do you know what they are? It's this passage right here. Listen to Jesus. Do what he tells you to do. Those are the last words of Mary recorded in the Bible. That's pretty helpful. Just do what Jesus tells you to do. Something for us to think about as we head into the week. The third one is serve. Serve to be able to gain a front row seat to God at work. It's fascinating to me. Sometimes I'll hear people, complain. I tried the Christian thing for a little while, and Christianity is just boring. It's just boring. Walk with God is boring. He says not to do and it's just boring. It's just boring. Listen, it's not boring if you're on the inside of what it is that God is doing. It's not boring if you're on the inside of what God is doing. Think about this. The first to see Jesus in action here wasn't kings. It wasn't princes. It was the people who weren't even invited to the party. They were working the party. That's the first people to be able to see the miracle here. They were the first to see the heart of God on display. God acting in the background, not drawing big attention, but God providing. Super cool to see the experience with God that these servants ended up having, that others never get a glimpse into because they spend their whole life avoiding service roles. I know that's hard for me to say, but it's true. It's true. Some of us never get to experience the hand of God and the work of God because we're actively avoiding doing the very things that God has called us to. We're actively avoiding service roles. These folks were just doing what God told them to do, and they got a front row seat. There's something to that. There's something to that. Jesus here. Think Jesus, his first miracle. The Logos, chapter 1 we looked at. The Logos, having taken on flesh, his first miracle here was seen first by and done through the obedience of servants. Like there's something to that. There's something to that we shouldn't ignore. So stand with me if you would, and I'm going to give us just a moment opportunity to be able to talk to God on these things. Maybe it's the prayer idea. Maybe it's the doing what Jesus tells you to do. Maybe it's the serving thing. Whatever it is that Jesus is talking to you on right now, I want to just give you a moment to be able to respond to him in prayer. So I'll give you a moment, and then I'll close this in a word of prayer. Every head bowed, every eye closed. I'll give you a moment to talk to God on these things, and then I'll close this in prayer. God, we do thank you here, first of all, for the big picture of what you've given us so far in John chapter 2, a pretty huge piece of evidence verifying to us that Jesus is no ordinary man, but rather he is indeed God in the flesh, our creator still creating, still giving direction and enabling miracles through simple obedience of servants. God, I, for one, want to be numbered among those servants. Help me to heed the advice of Mary, to do whatever it is that you say. God, help me to simply obey you. Yes, it's helpful for me to try to understand your commands and the reasons behind them and so forth, but God, while I get all of that would be helpful, these servants here in John 2 had no clue what was about to happen. They had absolutely no frame of reference for what was about to unfold. All they knew is that Jesus had told them to do it, so they obeyed and ended up with a front row seat to the very first miracle Jesus did. So God, help us, all of us, to serve in this way. Help us to be this responsive to you in everything that you called us to. In Jesus' name and for Jesus' glory in these days, I pray these things. Amen.